Good evening from ABC News headquarters in New York. I'm Howard K. Smith.
I'm Frank Reynolds. These are tonight's headlines. President Nixon claims victory in yesterday's election and says he has gained a working majority in Congress. In the election, the Republicans gained in the Senate and the Democrats gained in the House and in governorships. The United Nations General Assembly recommends a 90-day extension of the Middle East ceasefire. And the Marine Corps charges a sergeant with desertion and with aiding the enemy through propaganda broadcasts. Howard?
Reports tonight from Tom Jarrell on how President Nixon views the election, Bill Lawrence on the importance of governorships for the Democrats, Gregory Jackson on why New Yorkers voted the way they did for senator, Russell Jones on the prospects for an extension of the Middle East ceasefire, George Watson on the dustman strike in London, and tonight's comment on the election that matters. Well, it was one of those elections that allows both sides to claim success. There were 35 races in the Senate, and the Democrats won 21 of them, but the Republicans can point to the election of conservative Buckley in New York and the defeat of their number one target, Albert Gore, in Tennessee, among others. In the House, where all the seats were up, the Democrats added 9 districts to their column and easily won the right to control the flow of legislation in the next session. Traditionally, the Democrats would have added 36 seats, so the Republicans have that to their credit. In all, the president seemed pleased today by the way things went, as ABC White House correspondent Tom Jarrell now reports.
After examining the ambiguous political picture overnight, Mr. Nixon issued a statement. To a president strongly oriented toward foreign policy, the returns look good in that area because of slight GOP gains in the Senate.
The reason I was campaigning so hard over the country was that in the past 2 years, the Senate has been so evenly divided that a majority of one determined the big votes on foreign policy and national defense, and that I felt it was important to have more than a majority of one in support of the administration's policies in foreign policy and national defense. We have increased our majority now to a working majority. We have a working majority in both the House and the Senate for national defense and also for foreign policy. A working majority of 4 in the Senate, which means that in terms of the president's ability to conduct foreign policy, to make decisions that he considers and that his administration considers are important to the future of the country and to the cause of peace generally, that he can speak with a much stronger voice in the world than was previously the case.
The new congressional makeup will continue to cause the president problems on domestic legislation and on confirmation of questionable Supreme Court nominees. Also, significant gains by Democrats in gubernatorial races could foreshadow trouble for the president when he seeks re-election in '72. Tom Jarrell, ABC News, with the president in California.
In Washington, Democratic National Chairman Lawrence O'Brien said today that the Nixon administration turned the elections into a national referendum on its first 2 years in office, and said O'Brien, they lost that referendum. Senator Muskie of Maine is now the most visible spokesman for the Democrats, and his attitude is one of careful optimism. ABC's Roger Peterson reports from Washington.
Voicing his wishes for a good night's sleep, a tired Senator Muskie returned from re-election in Maine. Although he said the election results showed no clear mandate for either party,
Muskie said the election of several Democratic governors
has revitalized a tired Democratic Party.
We've lost some races that I think we deeply regret. The Tennessee race, the Maryland race, and we've won some, perhaps some we didn't really expect. It's a tremendous morale booster. As a matter of fact, I think the events of the last 7 days, including my pre-election speech, had a great deal of effect upon party morale. I think we began the rebuilding of the party and its capacity for victory and its will to win to a greater extent in the last 7 days than at any time in the last 2 years.
Sir, last night Vice President Agnew said that he thought that the president now had a working majority in the Senate. Would you agree with that assessment?
I wouldn't say that that's what might be described as a self-evident truth, no.
There was this word from Martha Mitchell, the outspoken wife of the Attorney General, asked today for her assessment of the election results. She said, quote, "Every place the Republicans lost is their own fault. A house divided against itself cannot stand, end quote. Mrs. Mitchell said she and her husband watched the election returns last night, and when asked about the Attorney General's reaction to the election results, she said, "Every time I tried to ask him something, he said, shh."
I hope you like cold cuts. You'll be eating them for a week.
You mean that crowd didn't eat everything?
At least now it's quiet.
And somebody scratched 2 of my records. Listen, no more parties. For a while, huh?
Okay.
This is the M&M moment. This is the M&M moment.
This is the moment for the two of you. A whole new L&M for right now. This is the moment for L&M's new blend. Rich new flavor, gentle new taste, in a bright new pack. New, rich L&M.
I guess I should start cleaning up now.
Just leave it till morning.
This is the M&M moment.
The Senate race in Indiana is still undecided, as Democratic Senator Vance Hartke holds a lead of less than 1,000 votes over Republican Congressman Richard Rauterbush. A recount there seems almost certain. Ohio Republican Robert Taft Jr., son of the late senator, finally won his race with Democrat Howard Metzenbaum this morning. Taft said his election was his life ambition. In Michigan, Republican Governor William Milliken is ahead, but experts say Democrat Sander Levin has a good chance to win. Only a third of the ballots in Detroit have been counted because of mechanical problems with a new punch card voting system. In this election of many contrasts, perhaps the most interesting was the election to the Senate of a liberal from California and a conservative from New York. ABC's Scott Osborne reports from New York.
Credit for victory, says New York's conservative Senator-elect James Buckley, goes to the ignored majority. At a news conference, Buckley explained that he will vote as a Republican and will work as a team member to give government back to the governed.
Well, I am another hand with very definite views as to what needs to be done. To the extent that there are others like-minded in the Senate, I hope we can build up a team which will have real influence and which will be able to start moving back in this direction of the new federalism, in other words, cutting back the size of the federal bureaucracy and restoring initiative to the states. I think there's been a real growing gap between government and the governed, that people have increasingly felt they've had no control over their destinies, and I think this is bad for the country.
When Buckley will begin voting in Washington is still not decided. He may begin at a lame duck session of Congress this month, replacing Senator Charles Goodell, who was appointed to the office. Or Buckley may be forced to wait until the first of the year. Scott Osborne, ABC News, New York.
This is Dick Shoemaker in Los Angeles. Democrat John Tunney was a happy man this morning. Tunney, a liberal, beat Republican Senator George Murphy by a surprising 600,000 votes. The new senator, who ran a Kennedy kind of campaign, said his first priority is to get this country out of Vietnam. He also said his victory was a serious blow to Richard Nixon.
I don't think that there's any question that it's a very serious blow to the political prestige of President Nixon, because he campaigned so extensively, personally, as well as sending out almost every member of his cabinet. And I think that this has to represent a great defeat for him, and it indicates that unless he changes his policies on Vietnam and the economy, that he's going to be in real trouble in 1972.
Senator Tunney does not see his victory as a trend. He doesn't see it as a move to the left. Rather, simply the need for new leadership in California. Dick Shoemaker, ABC News, in Los Angeles.
Dozens of local issues were resolved yesterday. Voters in 15 states were asked about lowering the voting age, and in 10 states they turned the idea down. In Massachusetts, the voters endorsed President Nixon's planned withdrawal from Vietnam. Texans voted to legalize saloons by local option, but voters in Kansas said no to the same idea. On the West Coast, California's voters picked Negro Wilson Riles as state superintendent of schools over ultra-conservative Max Rafferty. The governorships were also local issues, but the outcome has sweeping national implications. There are now at least 9 more Democratic governors in a category where the Republicans have had the upper hand. With a report, here is ABC's National Affairs Editor, Bill Lawrence.
The Democratic landslide among state governors was astonishingly large, and it was perhaps the most significant straw in the wind affecting the 1972 presidential elections. It gave the flabby Democratic Party machinery the muscle it had lacked, and it was a blow in the solar plexus of Republican organizational control. Democrats replaced Republicans at the helm of such politically important state machines as Pennsylvania, Ohio, Florida, and Wisconsin. And the big state of Michigan, still undecided, is not yet beyond the Democrats' grasp. These victories not only mean thousands of jobs for Democratic workers at a time when they are cut off from federal patronage, but it is perhaps more significant that they mean the Democrats will have control of a strong majority of state capitals when the redistricting decisions are made for Congress and state legislatures that will continue for a decade as required by the 1970 census. The Democrats had expected gains, but they were surprised themselves by the landslide. And now they have new hope that President Nixon can be denied re-election. This is Bill Lawrence, ABC News, New York.
We'll be back in a moment.
People who like to spend their time making and eating great food, but not cleaning up after, there's Teflon 2 certified cookware. It's no stick and very easy to clean. Teflon 2, to keep cleanup in its place.
We're going to drive home a point about anti-leak Zerex antifreeze. It stops most common radiator leaks just like that. We guarantee it will stop and prevent leaks in your car radiator for a full year, or just write DuPont and get your money back. Anti-leak Zerex antifreeze is guaranteed not to run out on you.
One of the most hard-fought races for the Senate was in New York State, the three-way battle that ended in victory for conservative James Buckley. The campaign perhaps reached its peak when President Nixon refused to support incumbent Republican Senator Charles Goodell, and Vice President Agnew launched a series of attacks against Goodell. To assess the effect the often bitter campaign had on the voters of New York State, Audits and Survey Incorporated, in cooperation with ABC News, surveyed 1,000 voters after they had cast their ballots. ABC's Gregory Jackson reports.
The fascination of polls seems to lie in the question, can men and computers guess what the voters are going to do before they do it? Our survey here is more interested in why they did what they've done, and 2 points emerge. One is there was far more unrest and indecision over the New York Senate race than had been foretold, and 2, that even months ago, Richard Ottinger, the Democrat, was far weaker as a candidate than was suspected. To begin with a comparison, our survey showed that nearly 9 out of 10 voters knew how they were going to vote in the governor's race at least 2 weeks before the election. Only 13% hadn't made up their minds. But in the Senate race, that undecided figure more than doubles to 28%, or about 1,600,000 voters. And now something fascinating. Of that 28%, or 1,600,000 voters, more than half of them changed their mind from one candidate to another as they were buffeted by events, a striking pattern of unrest and last-minute vote switching. Among those switchers, the most moved from Goodell to Ottinger, nearly 20%, which indicates Goodell originally was stronger than imagined, Ottinger weaker. Much of that switching was prompted by Buckley's strong showing in the polls and Vice President Agnew's attack on Goodell as a radical liberal. But Agnew's words worked 2 ways. 13% of the voters in our survey who switched said they decided to vote for Goodell because of Agnew's attack. And 11%, or about 53,000 voters, who decided to vote for Goodell rather than Ottinger at the last minute, said they did so even though they considered it a wasted vote. Finally, among those in our survey who switched to Buckley, 36% said his White House support was very important, and that the 2 issues that most helped them decide to vote for James Buckley were his conservative positions on crime and campus unrest. Gregory Jackson, ABC News, New York.
We'll be back with more news in a moment.
Maybe there's a better reason to keep your lips soft and nice. To relieve chapping, soothe soreness. Maybe there's a better reason to care, but there's no better care for your lips than ours. Chapstick. Regular or new flavored lip balm. If you don't care for your lips, nobody else will.
The people who make chapstick lip balm are very concerned about another part of your body, your hands. Because you put them in detergents and cleansers, you need Chap-Hands. It's medicated to soften and help heal dry, rough, red hands. Chap-Hands works even in detergent water to make your hands look better and feel better. Don't fool around with your hands. Really do them some good. Get Chap-Hands.
I had transmission trouble, so I called AMCO. First thing, we performed our free 19-point multi-check. Boy, was I shook. We found the trouble, told him he could have it back in one day. In most cases, that's all it takes. Boy, was I glad. Boy, was he glad. I tell you, if you ever have transmission trouble, there's only one place to go. AMCO.
When your car's transmission starts to go, take it to AMCO. Our mission is transmissions. AMCO. Our mission is transmissions. AMCO.
Us Territon smokers would rather fight than switch. And there's a reason. Territon is better. Charcoal is why. Territon's activated charcoal delivers a better taste. A taste no plain white filter can match. Territon is better. Charcoal is why.
Territon is better. Charcoal is why. Territon is better. Charcoal is why. Territon is better. Charcoal is why. Territon is better. Charcoal is why. Territon is better. Charcoal is why. Territon is better. Charcoal is why.
At 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, New York time, the ceasefire in the Middle East officially comes to an end. Today, the General Assembly of the United Nations called on all sides to extend that ceasefire for another 90 days. And late this afternoon, Egypt announced that the Arab side will honor that request. The United States and Israel objected to the way the resolution was worded because it seemed to accept ceasefire violations already committed, but Israel is not expected to fire first. Troops along the Suez Canal have increased their state of readiness, but there is cautious optimism in Israel, as ABC's Russell Jones reports from Tel Aviv.
The clock timing the 90-day ceasefire along the Suez Canal is rapidly running out, with less than 36 hours to go before the Arabs and the Israelis might start shooting again. However, the best guess here in Tel Aviv is that formally or informally, the ceasefire will be extended, the guns will remain silent, and the warplanes grounded. Despite repeated Israeli protests about alleged Egyptian violations of the standstill on their side of the canal, no responsible Israeli has called for a resumption of the fighting. To the contrary, top leaders here have repeatedly said that Israel will not be the first to start shooting. Of course, they have also said that Israel will not participate in peace talks until the alleged violations have been rectified. That is, the newly installed Egyptian missiles be removed. But again, the guessing here is that some sort of formula will be worked out so that peace negotiations, probably secret and indirect, will get underway before another 90 days has passed. This is Russell Jones, ABC News in Tel Aviv.
Air Force Secretary Robert Seamans presided today in Vietnam as another Air Force base was turned over to the South Vietnamese. Seamans said, "We're now running ahead of schedule in efforts to Vietnamese the air war." But American bombers are still very active. Over the last 4 weeks, our B-52s have dropped enough conventional explosives on the Ho Chi Minh Trail to equal 3 atomic bombs. For several months, a frequently heard name in broadcasts from Hanoi was Sergeant John Sweeney. He claimed his American commander in Vietnam left him for dead on the battlefield, and the communists nursed him back to health. Sweeney eventually wound up in Sweden. Then in August, he returned to the United States. Well, today, the Marine Corps officially charged him with desertion and aiding the enemy in Vietnam.
office routine doesn't have to be routine. All it takes is a few plants, some colorful flower arrangements, a little imagination, and suddenly work is beautiful. What secretary wouldn't work happier with this on her desk? Place a standing order with your florist now. And flowers are a smart gift idea for clients, too. A dozen long-stemmed roses, a corsage, a growing plant, a brandy snifter filled with cymbidium orchids, a combination flower and candy gift. No other modestly priced gift says as much as flowers. For the people in your office, for your clients. Make their world a little brighter today. Do it with flowers.
In other news today, baseball's holdout player Curt Flood signed a contract with the Washington Senators. The contract reportedly puts Flood's salary over $100,000, and it contains the controversial reserve clause that Flood has been attacking in the courts. Actress Jane Fonda pleaded innocent in Cleveland Municipal Court today to charges of assaulting a policeman. Her $500 bail was continued pending a jury trial in January. This was the appearance of Charles Manson 11 months ago when he was arrested on murder charges in the Sharon Tate murder case. This is his appearance today in a new picture released after a haircut. In England, Buckingham Palace has denied that the Duke of Clarence, great-uncle of Queen Elizabeth, was Jack the Ripper. The palace said he couldn't have been, that the Duke was out of town when two of Jack the Ripper's victims met their fate. And authorities in London are now frankly worried about the possibility of serious fires tomorrow on Guy Fawkes Day. Traditionally, there are fireworks and bonfires on that day, but this year the danger is intensified by London's 6-week-old strike of the city's dustmen, or garbagemen. The city is heaped high with mounds of trash. A report now from George Watson.
Uncollected mountains of garbage are piling up in the streets of London. It's the second time in 2 years that garbage men have gone out on strike, demanding higher pay for admittedly dirty work. The result is an eyesore and an increasing health hazard. Fetid masses of the mess are attracting insects and rodents, and there is fear of spreading disease. The strike has also shut down some sewage treatment plants, and officials fear that the Thames River may be further polluted, killing marine life and causing ecological damage for years to come. The British politely call their garbage collectors dustmen, but that does not disguise the dirty nature of the work or its low status and meager pay. One disgruntled striker explained it this way.
We ain't asking for nothing exorbitant, just the living wage. Now, the majority of our people walk away after stoppages with £13, which would come out of your money somewhere in about $30 a week. Now, you can't say that anyone can live on that money, personally.
The strike is forcing many Englishmen to do their own dirty work, hauling off their garbage to makeshift dumps. It's also mobilizing public opinion behind Prime Minister Heath's efforts to introduce some order into the chaotic conditions of British labor relations. The Prime Minister thinks the public is sick and tired of strikes. This is George Watson, ABC News, London.
Montreal police said today they are still looking for 25 men in connection with various extremist acts by the Quebec Liberation Front. 5 of the wanted men are suspects in the kidnapped murder of the Quebec Labor Minister Pierre Laporte and the abduction of James Cross, a British diplomat. In Moscow, Izvestia today published an interview with Chile's Marxist president Salvador Allende, in which Allende said his government planned to, quote, liberate the country from imperialism, end quote. He also was quoted as saying he hopes for stronger ties with the Soviet Union. In New York today, Angela Davis, the black revolutionary, won a court order directing her release from isolation in the Women's House of Detention. Prison authorities had kept her from mingling with other prisoners on the grounds that her presence disrupted routine. We'll be back in a moment.
Fresh air. I love the taste of it. And fresh air is what makes Maryland 100s taste like no other menthol cigarette. Maryland tobacco is fresh air cured. Other cigarettes contain some heat-treated tobacco. Tobacco dried in heated barns for only 6 days. But Maryland 100's 100% fresh air cured for up to 8 long lazy weeks. Fresh air cured tobaccos that taste cool with menthol. New Maryland menthol.
I had transmission trouble, so I called AMCO. First thing, we performed our free 19-point multi-check. Boy, was I shook. We found the trouble, told him he could have it back in 1 day. In most cases, that's all it takes. Boy, was I glad. Boy, was he glad. I tell you, if you ever have transmission trouble, there's only one place to go. AMCO.
When your car's transmission starts to go, take it to AMCO. Our mission is transmissions. AMCO. Our mission is transmissions. AMCO.
Well, the elections are over. Their effect is clear. Now is the time to formulate constructive policies to draw profit and not loss from the results. The elections, I mean, are not those that happened in this country yesterday. Their evidence is we're a pretty level-headed people and do not swing violently even in a time of change. I mean the elections in Chile, which resulted in the inauguration yesterday of a Marxist president with socialist policies. Let us be properly firm and insist on compensation for American industries, which inevitably will now become public property. But let us keep in mind that those industries have extracted their value in profits over the years. Let us offer the hand of friendship and help. If we don't, President Allende will be forced, whether he wishes or not, to ask Russia for help, to bring in a horde of Russian technicians, and in repayment to turn his country into a new bridgehead for the Soviet Empire, which is now grasping out in every direction. Let us be aware that something had to give in South America. Our own Alianza for Progress was not working, mainly due to the reluctance of local forces to make changes in their countries. Chile, now changing, may be the place to start it working. President Nixon has shown imagination in dealing with other foreign affairs. Let him summon it now. Here's one we can win if we behave with the same level-headedness manifest in our own elections yesterday. Frank?
Thank you, Howard. That's tonight's news and a comment. I'm Frank Reynolds. Good night.
This has been the ABC Evening News with Frank Reynolds and Howard K. Smith, Monday through Friday, in color. On Issues and Answers this coming Sunday, Howard K. Smith will interview Lady Bird Johnson. Watch Issues and Answers this coming Sunday over most of these ABC stations. Consult your local listings for time. This has been a presentation of ABC News. A broken...